Hello and welcome to this session on the Archives and Manuscripts online archive as part of Information Awareness Month in 2020. I acknowledge that I'm hosting this session from the lands of the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra, and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people participating in this session. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to lands and waters. Sovereignty was never ceded. My name is Dr. Jessie Lymn, and I'm a member of the Australian Society of Archivists Council and current Managing Editor of Archives and Manuscripts. I'm also a lecturer in Records and Archives Management at Sturt University in Wagga Wagga, and am committed to ongoing research and education for our profession. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Joanna Sassoon, who's been an active member of the Archives and Manuscripts online archive project team over the last few years. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you, Jessie, and greetings from Perth.
So today we wanted to talk to you about the Archives and Manuscripts online archive, a little bit about development and production of the site, and also talk about how you can use the archive itself. To start, I want to acknowledge that this project is one that's been an ongoing commitment of the ASA Council over a number of years, and its launch in late 2019 was due to the efforts of a great team of individuals and organisations, all who've played an integral role in getting the archive online. Archives and Manuscripts is the academic journal publication of the Australian Society of Archivists and has been in continuous production since the first issue in 1955. Since 2012, the journal has been published under a contract with the commercial publishing company Taylor and Francis, and we'll talk a bit more about how to access issues from 2012 onwards at the end of this presentation. The archive section of the Library Association of Australia, which is now known as ALIA, was formed in 1955. And in the same year, the section established the journal, Archives and Manuscripts, with inaugural editors being Phyllis Mander-Jones and Alan Horton. In 1975, 20 years later, the ASA was formed, Australian Society of Archivists, and the archive section of the LAA was dissolved, and Archives and Manuscripts was officially handed over to the ASA. This history was important to reflect on in the development of the online archive, as it became a part of the major rights discussions and negotiations that took place in order to get all of these issues online. Joanna, I understand you're involved in the process of establishing the rights and permissions. Could you tell us a bit more about what you did and how you thought about it?
That's right. The rights and permissions issue was really important to the ASA Council, and we felt that it was actually vital to get the rights managements documented and sorted properly once and for all. Over the years with the ASA and the Archives and Manuscripts, there have been several different changes to practices and thinking about who owned the rights in the papers. And so rather than taking a completely black letter law attitude towards the rights, we decided to deal uniformly with the issue of rights over the whole era from 1955 till the cessation of the publication of Archives and Manuscripts by the ASA. So what we did was we drafted a letter that went through several council and ASA members who had a good legal background. And what this letter said was that we wanted permission to publish the digitised version of people's papers, and we wanted these authors to grant the ASA non-exclusive rights to these papers. So it was while it had some legal principles in this letter, it was not black letter law approach. Okay. Now, what we also did, which is very important practically, is we tried to make it easy for people to respond to this letter by giving people the wording in the letter that we wanted to get back from them. What we then did was post this letter out to all ASA members through the Archives Matters, and we posted it on listservs around the world. In essence, we were taking a passive approach. We hoped that people would respond to these posts, and guess what? Nobody did. So we then had to go through a much more active approach to tracking down every single author since 1955. What was particularly useful was the obituaries in the ASA, in the Archives and Manuscripts actually told me who I didn't need to track down any further. But in trying to track every author, it was absolutely fascinating. I mean, obviously I used the internet for searching, but I also used senior members of the profession who were very generous in telling me or letting me into all their social networks. Because what I really learned through doing this whole process of tracking everybody who'd ever printed anything, and including book reviews or news and notes, everything in archives and manuscript. What I learned was two things, or several things. One was that some people had had very stable careers and they were still in the archives profession. Some were still with the same employer after a long period of time. However, some people had actually had very mobile careers, and some people we sent this non-legalistic letter to turned out to be QCs and very high in the legal profession, who actually complimented us on the letter we'd written. So by the end of the process, we knew that we'd done a reasonably good job. At the end of doing all of this, what I really learned was that by entering into the social network of the archives profession, I learned how connected everybody still is, going right back to some of those early members from the 1950s. And in the end, there were very few people who I simply couldn't trace. There was no trace of them anywhere. And so what was really good about this whole process was that we learned how connected the profession still is, and we also got to some senior members of the profession just in time. And so they learned that the work that they put out in the late 1950s, people like Bob Sharman and Nancy Lutton, for instance, learned that their work that they had written in the late 1950s and 60s was still valuable to the profession today. So I think that that was extraordinarily important as a gift back, as part of this whole approach to thinking about rights, which was not legalistic, but was as much about risk and courtesy as it was about rights.
Thank you. That's a beautiful reflection there, Joanna. I really appreciate that. Following on from that and thinking about the rights and the ownership, we decided to make the archive open access. And so that means that there's no restrictions on access or any requirement to pay for articles. And it means that the body of knowledge created over the 56 years that the archive covers is accessible to all who have access to an internet connection. So it's online. The articles aren't limited to those who have access, the articles aren't limited to those who have access just to subscription databases, or who can walk into a library, or who have a copy of the journal on their shelf. The online archive that you can see here is built in an open source system called Open Journal Systems, which we shortened to OJS. This is the same system, for example, that the Association of Canadian Archivists use to publish their journal Archivaria. We worked with a company called PKP, or the Public Knowledge Project, to build the system. And they helped us by building the system or the site, importing all the files and metadata, and maintaining the site in an ongoing basis. So open source software it's great because it's in the public domain, and it means we don't pay for a license to use this software and to have it here, but we still need the expert support from PKP to work with the system and to keep the site up to date. So what I wanted to do now is just have a quick look at some of the features of the site. This About the Journal section gives you an overview of the aims and scope of the journal, a statement about copyright and the takedown policy that Joanna helped develop. There's some history of the journal, including a list of all the editors over time, and they're all there for you to view. Helps you put it in context as well. And there's also a link over to Taylor and Francis for the current issues and to make submissions to the current journal. And for those of you who have, so there's that information about the journal, and then we get into searching and how to search the journal. So there's two main ways to access material on this website, either searching or browsing. But there's also, for those of you who are familiar with the print publication of archives and manuscripts, you would know that there's a series of indexes produced in the early years. And these indexes provide excellent cross-referencing for articles and concepts. So volumes 1 to 3 of the indexes are available in the online archive at the moment, or the index to the first 3 volumes. And we were just in the process of getting volumes 4 to 6 up as COVID time started. So just keep an eye out for them, they're on their way. Then the index here is listed alphabetically and broken down into 8 different PDFs that you can go through. So all of the articles that were published from 1955 to 2011 were scanned, and when they were scanned, we ensured that they were full text searchable. And so now it's possible to search for mentions of individual names, organisations, places and concepts in the pages of the journal. So, for example, if you wanted to search for articles that discuss climate change, you can simply type in the search box here, climate change. I type it properly, hit search, and it brings up a number of records. Oh, I've spelled it wrong, sorry. It brings up a number of records, and as you look at them, none of them actually have climate change in the title. But when you click through, and I'll choose this one here of Joanna's, for example, you can get the whole article as a PDF, and you can search within the article to see the mention of the word climate change. So you simply search here for climate, for example, you find 13 matches. So as archivists, we know that without archives, there would be no debate about climate change, for example. And this gives you the opportunity to really look past the titles and look into the content of the articles. So Joanna, you spent a great amount of time creating the metadata because there are over 2,000 individual articles that you have created the metadata for on the archive. Could you tell us a bit more about this process and what you did?
Well, metadata, creating metadata suits a structured mind, let's put it like that. And there was a decision that we had to make very early on. Is this just going to be about raw bibliographic data, which would mean that we would be the same as every other indexing database, even like Informit, which also has access to some of these documents online? Or are we going to be documenting the contents of the whole journal? And what we decided was that we're going to because we were an archive, we were documenting the whole contents of the journal, so that we've got every single front cover, all the information from the inside of the cover, all the advertisements, all the back cover information, and all the papers and the book reviews and all the different sections that are also part of the journal that other indexing databases never pick up. So in the end, the bibliographic data was for not just the contents of the papers, but for the contents and the framework of the whole journal.
I'll just open up an example here from 1995, which has the table of contents in context, and also a couple of ads. So an ad for the 1995 conference in Adelaide, oh no, Canberra, sorry. And yes, so I think that context is really important to highlight there, Joanna, thank you. So the other way we can, the metadata can be used, or that we use the metadata, is through, it enables the browsing of the journal issues and volumes, and also down to article level. So you can use these year groupings, decade groupings, to browse through. So I'm going to go into 1994, which is in this 88 to 98 section, and choose the issue 1994, volume 22, issue 1, which had, it was a special issue that was put out in 1994, and it was titled Electronic Record Keeping Issues and Perspectives, and was guest edited by Glenda Ackland. So I find this interesting for myself, looking through it, looking at the articles and the topics of the articles here, just from the titles, gives insight into topics that we're still grappling with 25 years later. And I think the value of that is immense to reflect on. Joanna, was there anything that stood out for you as you were working through? So you've had a chance to go through every single volume and issue of the journal. Anything that stood out in particular?
I think there are a couple of things that struck me as I was going through this. About the sense of the archival profession. One is that right from the start, there was a determination to gather information about what was going on in Australia and internationally, and how archivists internationally were thinking about issues that we were grappling with in Australia, and also to support archives in the region, specifically in the Pacific. And so I think right from the start, you can see archivists are incredibly collaborative people as a profession. And I think that's something that we need to remember. The other thing that really struck me was that this set of archives and manuscripts captures a moment in archival theory where Australia was leading the world. And I think that that moment is not as strong as it used to be, and yet the literature that is in archives and manuscripts up until 2011 captures debates between key international thinkers, of which Australia was a leading part. And I think what is really important about this whole project of putting archives and manuscripts online, and why I was so keen to actually see that it happened and therefore put up my hand to do some of the donkey work, is that now this moment in archival thinking over the decades is now available to people in countries that up until now could not afford to subscribe to archives and manuscripts. So the principle behind this whole project is that not only we were exposing Australian thinking to the world, but we were doing so in the same way as the collaborative principles on which the profession started in the 1950s. And for me, that is what is really significant about this project.
I agree with you there. As an educator, it's also meant that I now have access to resources for teaching that give me more depth and breadth to the contextualisation and historical development of archival thinking in Australia, which is really important to our university level courses as well. So it's where my motivation and commitment has come from too. So this is our online archive. Where are we now? We launched the archive in late 2019, and we've actually seen really great use of the archive and a real increase of the searches and browsing on the site in the last few months. So these strange times of isolation and working from home have meant people have had more time to get into the archive. So we acknowledge there are still improvements to be made, and it's a definite work in process, and we're very happy to take feedback from you. So you might find a record that needs updating. It could have a spelling mistake, or the author attributions haven't transferred correctly. So we can change that information very quickly and easily. So please send it on. You can send it to our office@archivists.org.au email address, and we'll get straight onto it. And just finally, the current journal, as we've said, 2012 onwards, and all volumes from volume 40 onwards are available through the Taylor and Francis database, and there is a link just here on the sidebar. And so the last 3 issues of archives and manuscripts, the last 3 volumes are only available to subscribers. And so if you are an ASA member, you are a subscriber. And so to get access to that, you need to log into the ASA Member Centre, and you'll be able to access the last 3 years as well as all other issues from 1955 onwards through either the archive or the Taylor and Francis site. So just today, I want to say thank you again to everyone who supported us and the ASA in getting this online archive to where it is. And we hope it gives you a great opportunity to explore your own past, research some theories and practices, and reflect on where the profession has come from and where we're heading to. Joanna, any closing comments from you?
I think you said it all, Jessie. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, and thanks everyone. Bye. Hello everyone, it's Jessie here again. Thanks for watching that recording. I'm happy to take questions if you have any through the question box up here on your screen. Nothing there at the moment, but I can stick around for a little bit longer if there's anything to come. We have a lot of people here who've been involved in the development of the site as well, so it's good to see lots of familiar names. Thank you for that. Just having a look here, there's a question, just a comment. So great work, a wonderful accessible resource. Thank you, Josie. I can see that there. It's been a great pleasure to work with and great to indulge in a way. It's been a real indulgence in going into the past articles and getting to have a look at them and see, as we talked about, the breadth of work that is there and that's now available to everyone. So what articles have been most popular so far, Janet? That's an excellent question, or Jeanette. The first issue, so the 1955 issue, has been the most popular because we did feature that when we first loaded the all the issues up, and so we got a lot of hits on that and lots of people going in to just browse through there. I need to get back to you to get the most recent, most popular articles. We only just got a report through this week, so I'll have to go back to you, get back and have a look at that, but we can definitely update that. And I'm happy to share that with the ASA community actually every now and then, so I can send some updates through. Emma, you've asked how many people were involved in the project. So that's a very good question. Over the years, I would say it's innumerable. This is a project that I have come into in the last 2 years, and have been in, there's been probably 4 or 5 people involved actively in the last 2 years, but before then there's been a lot more people at council level and within the ASA community who've been involved, including people who shared their organisational resources to digitise the material, people who've done administrative work, a lot of IT work as well, sorting through a lot of testing and project planning. Another question, the search functionality, is there a way to limit to just articles, so to exclude reviews, for example? There isn't at the moment, but we have the capacity to further develop that search interface, and so that's something we'd love feedback on, so I'll definitely take that on. Thank you, Bonnie. And we would like to be able to do more of that type of limiting, so we have the metadata there, we can do it, we just need to get our support team at PKP to help us develop that search, so thank you. So Andrea has asked, is there a plan to have a rolling change to open source for the most recent publications, or will they need to stay behind the TNF paywall? Andrea, it's a good question. So the current journal published by TNF is accessible, it's open up until the last 3 years. So 2018, 19 and 20 are behind the TNF paywall, but you can still go to the TNF site and access the prior to 2018 or prior to the last 3 years in open format. So that was part of our contract that we negotiated with TNF. We can always talk into the future, listen to membership and see what the member needs are. At the moment, as a member, you have access to the behind the paywall, and we can look to other options and talk about that in the future, as we have done in the past, as we moved through the Taylor and Francis period. So Wayne has said, I have missed this, I may have missed this, but can you talk about the technical requirements used in the digitisation process, e.g. DPI, QA checking, etc. Wayne, actually, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can take it on notice. I picked up the project, I came in onto council and picked up the project well after all of the digitisation had been done, and I know it's been done at multiple different sites around the country of people who've offered their resources. I will endeavour though to follow that up, and I'll put that information up on the A&M site itself so that we have that data there, if that's okay. And Catherine has asked, does the database integrate with library catalogues? Catherine, we're working at the moment to mint DOIs for each of the articles in the current archive, and so we will then be able to list the have those articles listed in the Directory of Open Access Journals, for instance, once that DOI minting's been done, which will then, if the library catalogue is indexing that directory, for instance, we'll be able to enable access that way. I hope that answers your question. Great, excellent. It's a slow process. It's a process that bigger entities are much better at managing and working through, but we're getting there, so it's good. But excellent questions, everyone. They're getting me thinking. Thank you, everyone, for all your comments as well. It's a great project to work on. I've really enjoyed it. I'm starting to see people leaving. So James, I'm not sure if there's any, I'll be here for a little bit longer, but there might not be any more questions coming through. Yeah, so we'll wrap it up. It's a nice half-hour session, so a little lunch break session. It's been good to see everyone. I hope you're having a great Information Awareness Month coming to the end. And please keep sending the feedback through. So these questions are really great to help us focus on what our users need. So thank you. See you later, everyone.